Hey all, and welcome already to week 11 of the NFL season. This is the NFL DFS Slate Playbook here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Today is Saturday, November 21st, 2020. I'm getting you guys this video a little bit later in the evening on Saturday, but nonetheless, we're talking DFS main slate, FanDuel, DraftKings, wherever you play. We're going to discuss the main core plays, picks, stacks, all the goodness you need for main slate DFS starting tomorrow on Sunday. We're going to talk quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, even tight ends, and there is a surprising tight end that we need to talk about in this particular video. So if all that is interesting to you guys, if you're looking to play and dominate in DFS, you've come to the right place. Sit back, relax. Let's spend the next 20 or 30 minutes talking DFS main slate football for week 11. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the video. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another week of NFL DFS here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Of course, we're talking week 11 here already. Pretty crazy. We're late into November talking week 11 NFL football already. I hope you're enjoying your Saturday as this video comes out to you guys. Hopefully you guys are here for DFS, specifically main slate DFS tomorrow. If you're playing FanDuel, if you're playing DraftKings, it really doesn't matter. We're going to cover all of those sites, every player that I think you need to be building around, core players that I personally will be including in my lineups. All of that is discussed in this video, so sit back, relax. Welcome to the video. Welcome to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. If you're new here, the only thing I ask before we get any further, please make sure you're subscribed to this channel and give these videos a like. It goes a long way in helping to support this channel, so I'd really appreciate if you guys would take a second there and smash that subscribe button. It does really mean a lot to me. And leave me some comments down below. We're going to talk probably, 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 4 receivers, and a couple tight ends. I'm not going to cover all positions. I'm not going to cover every single player that I'm going to be including into my lineups. So leave me some comments if I've missed anybody or haven't mentioned anybody that should be mentioned. I'd love to hear from you guys. But nonetheless, we've been running hot in NFL DFS for the last, really this entire season. I think we've only had 1 or 2 really bad dud weeks. Outside of that, if you're talking GPP tournament style videos, some of the picks that we have been absolute fire. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you have notifications, all that good stuff turned on, because we will continue to rock here through the remainder of this NFL season. But let's start here with week 11. What are we looking at for Slate Outlook? Of course, every single week here, we're talking 11 total games on the main slate, barring if anything does happen. Of course, you see here, stay up to date as always. I'm going to have this every single week moving forward. Stay up to date with illness, stay up to date with the things that can happen, to postpone games, to move them around, to missing players. All that stuff is a really serious issue basically in the NFL this season, but more importantly, if you're playing DFS and you're putting money up, you want to make sure you pay attention to who's in, who's out, because of what's happening in 2020. And things around the country right now are getting a little worse according to everything. So it's more important now than ever to make sure you're staying up to date with that stuff. Now, in terms of what our strategy for this week is, for week 11, looking to spend up a quarterback. I will say this is a lower scoring week from a Vegas perspective. There is only, at this moment, while I'm recording this video, 1 game projected above a 50 over-under. Every other game is below that. We had the big game that didn't actually hit it on Thursday night. I think that was like a 67 or 68 Seattle, Arizona Vegas spread, or should I say Vegas over-under in that game. Outside of that, we have nothing really to talk about in terms of high Vegas totals for this week. So it should be, according to Vegas, a lower scoring week. Nonetheless, we're looking to spend up at the quarterback position. In addition to that, mid-price running backs are available this week. I am definitely interested in the most expensive guy, as I'm sure you guys are too, as I'm sure the industry is. But nonetheless, we can find some value in some mid-price backs for sure, which we will talk about. There are also a number of value wide receivers that are going to help you fit those more expensive players at quarterback, that expensive running back. And then we're going to spend down, of course, most weeks we do this, but we're going to spend down at tight end. And again, stay tuned towards the end of this. If you guys have watched anything else or been paying attention to the industry, there is a very, very important play, in my opinion, over on FanDuel. Some people would call it a mistake, but we're going to take advantage of it. I'm sure that a lot of people are going to take advantage of it, but stay tuned to the end of this video when we talk tight ends. There is a guy that I think I will be including in nearly 75, 80, 90% of my lineups. Moving over to the Vegas segment of this video here, I already talked about it. There's only one game you can see, bottom right-hand corner of your screen, Green Bay at Indianapolis. That is the only game above 50 for an over-under. That's at 51.5. Pretty unusual for NFL in 2020. We've had several games, 4, 5, 6 games every single week exceeding that number, that 50 over-under. We always highlight those in green. We don't have that this week. We're going to have to play around. A lot of these teams, if you can see here, are projected under 30. In fact, every single team is projected under 30 for an implied team total. So I did adjust a little bit. The number we're looking at here for teams we're attracted to, the higher end teams in terms of scoring relative to this week, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, Minnesota, Chargers, and Baltimore, all above 27 implied team total. And then on the flip side, the teams that are below 22, Denver, Dallas, New York Jets, Tennessee, and Jacksonville, teams that you may want to stay away from in terms of stacking, in terms of picking a lot of players from those games, from those teams. So nonetheless, that's what we're looking at for Vegas this week. We'll see how that plays out. So let's try to move a little quickly here. Let's talk quarterbacks as always first. Justin Herbert is going to lead me off here, and this is basically a copy and paste job for the last 3 weeks. We've been on this guy, No Huddle Fantasy Sports. If you've been watching these videos, we've been playing a ton of Justin Herbert, and he has been absolutely excellent. In fact, I think he stands out as the best quarterback in this class of 2020. Now, you can argue Burrow, you can argue Tua, and all the different things that you can argue back and forth. I really think Justin Herbert, in the situation he's in, he's getting it done behind a really bad offensive line. Burrow is also, but nonetheless, this guy has been absolutely lightning and has been really great for DFS, for us particularly, playing him at lower prices. Now, unfortunately, his price has bumped way, way up. In fact, he's more expensive than Lamar Jackson. I believe Justin Herbert is the second most expensive player, second most expensive quarterback on this slate, at least on FanDuel. So it's $8,500 on FanDuel, $68 on DraftKings. Difficult pill to swallow in terms of pricing, but on this slate, relative to what we have available, he definitely is in play. He's playing at home this week versus the Jets with a 46 over-under. The Chargers are big favorites at -8.5 with a 27.3 implied team total. Now, I mentioned he is a big home favorite at -8.5, but the thing is, they have very little running game support. The running backs are either banged up, hurt, or just not performing right now. You can argue all day Josh Kelly is a good running back. I would argue the other way. They just do not have the running game going. So even though they're a big favorite at home, they have a good implied team total, a top 3 implied team total. When they score, they're going to score through Herbert, in my opinion. You can still go there, even though this is kind of against the typical strategy of taking a home big favorite quarterback. I still like the play here. Now, talking about some numbers for Herbert himself, he has a minimum of 21 fantasy points in each of the last 6 games he started. Thinking about that, both on DraftKings and FanDuel, this guy has put up a minimum of 21 fantasy points. Last week was his worst week, and I believe he still got around 24 points. He gets it done on the ground too. You can see here he has 4 to 5 rushing attempts per game, and in addition to that, more importantly, he has 9 red zone rushing attempts. He leads his team in red zone rushing attempts. Those are just things that are going to help him set a floor. It's going to give you more upside if he can get into that end zone in terms of running the ball. Just a lot of good things in favor of Justin Herbert here. In addition to all of that, it's a great matchup versus the Jets here at home. The Jets give up 282 passing yards per game. That's 29th overall in football. Keep in mind, there's only 32 teams. The New York Jets give up a 73 completion rate. That is a ridiculous completion rate. 3/4 of the balls thrown against that secondary are caught. That is by far the most in the NFL, the worst in the NFL. Just a really good stat, though, for Herbert and company in terms of a stack, in terms of putting him up against that secondary. And then finally here, the New York Jets are giving up the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterback. So all of that put together, you can see it's all coming together in terms of fantasy points scored against that Jets team. I do like Justin Herbert, even though he's a big favorite at home. He's my favorite quarterback on this slate as of now. I have not done a whole lot in terms of looking at ownership. So these things can change. That's the only disclaimer I'll give you guys. If he's going to be 40% owned, which I doubt it, but if he is, we're going to change things up here a little bit. But nonetheless, Herbert, by far right now, one of my favorite quarterbacks on the slate. Sliding over here to somebody that's surprisingly lesser expensive on FanDuel is Lamar Jackson. $8,400 on FanDuel, $73 on DraftKings. Playing at home this week versus Tennessee, 49.5 over-under, so a higher over-under in this game, one of the highest on the slate. And Baltimore is a good favorite at -6.5 with a 27.8 implied team total. So both of these quarterbacks have good team totals. Both of them are playing at home, and they're decent favorites. Again, against the strategy I typically go with, but both of these guys, for their own reasons, separate reasons, stand out to me even though they're at home. Overall, Lamar Jackson's season is a down season. Relatively speaking, the dude was insane last year, fantasy football wise, regular football wise, anything you look at for 2019. He won the MVP, but Lamar Jackson was insane. So relative to that, he is having a down season. But I think overall, he's in a great bounce back spot here. I think he's hungry. In fact, this is a great revenge spot versus the team, the Tennessee Titans, that came into Baltimore last year in the playoffs and knocked the Baltimore Ravens out of playoffs. So nonetheless, I think Lamar Jackson in a great spot, despite the down season, in a great spot, a revenge spot. He's hungry here, and a lot of reasons stated forward are going to kind of explain that here for you guys. He's priced down, first and foremost. I mentioned he's lesser expensive than Justin Herbert, so that should tell you something here. As a result, the receivers that you compare him with, even the tight end and Andrews, it's an affordable stack with Lamar Jackson. He's a guy you can run naked. You don't need to stack him with players. I always stack GPP-wise, tournament-wise. I will always stack my quarterbacks. Nonetheless, Lamar Jackson with a stack is an affordable stack, surprisingly, this week. His increase in rushing attempts are apparent over his last 3 games. Earlier this season, you really didn't see what you saw in 2019, which was that 15 to 20 rushing attempts per game. But he has bumped that number up over the last 3. He's averaging 13 plus rushing attempts over those last 3 games. So something we want to see. One of the main reasons why you play Lamar Jackson is what he can do on the ground. More importantly, he continues to get red zone rushing attempts. He has 21 red zone rushing attempts on the season. Without a touchdown, he may have a touchdown in the red zone. I'm not positive, but nonetheless, 21 red zone attempts. At some point, this guy's going to start scoring. Anybody, a running back, a wide receiver, a quarterback, if you're getting that many red zone rushing attempts, at some point, positive regression will catch up and you'll start scoring touchdowns. So let's be a part of that. Hopefully that's this week. He gets 3, 4, 5 red zone rushing attempts and finds the end zone with his legs. But nonetheless, it's still a great spot. 2019, if you go back to that revenge game, or this is the revenge game, if you go back to 19, this dude lit up Tennessee. 365 passing yards in that playoff game. He threw 1 touchdown through the air. But more importantly, the guy had 20 rushing attempts for 143 rushing yards versus that Tennessee team in that playoff game last year where they got knocked off. So let's hope he goes right back to that same performance. We'll take that at $8,400, 73 on DraftKings for sure. But a couple other numbers I will point out in favor of him. Tennessee's pass rush grade is right now 21st in the NFL. So they have a good defense. They're pretty good against the pass in general, but they get very, very little out of their pass rush. For a guy that, like Lamar Jackson, that can run the ball down your throat over and over again, sit in the pocket is a dangerous, dangerous situation to be in. Hopefully this guy takes advantage of that. Hopefully Lamar Jackson is able to get another 15, 20 rushing attempts against this Tennessee team. Last but not least here, Tennessee gives up, even though they're pretty good against the pass, they're pretty good in terms of numbers and all of the things that you would look at against quarterbacks. They're giving up the 9th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson here in a good spot in my opinion. We'll see how the ownership plays out for him, but I do really like Lamar Jackson as one of my top 2 quarterbacks on the DFS slate, both on FanDuel and DraftKings. So checking out running backs here, I'm going to start with a guy that's on everybody's radar, of course. That's Dalvin Cook. He is ridiculously expensive on FanDuel at $10,500. He's $9K on DraftKings, and for good reason. This guy has been an absolute monster, both in basically in every format of football: fantasy football, regular football, season-long football, DFS football. This guy has been absolutely crazy, and we have taken advantage of it. If you've watched previous videos, we've been on Dalvin Cook when he has had those crazy games at low ownership, 6-7%. Now, you're not going to get that this week. People are on Dalvin Cook, of course, but he is expensive. He's hard to fit. We're going to see how that ownership plays out. He checks every box. He's playing at home this week versus Dallas, 48.5 over-under, so a decent over-under, relatively speaking, to this particular slate. Minnesota is a good favorite at -7 over a touchdown with a 27.8 implied team total. The boxes that we look for are all checked there. Huge home favorite, good implied team total. He plays a ton of snaps, gets good usage both in the passing game and the running game. And then the matchup itself here with Dallas is just a plus matchup. Again, likely a chalkier play here. It doesn't matter. We're going to go there. You can play chalk in tournaments. It's okay when you're comfortable with it. He's a pure monster on the ground right now, even in bad games. And we go back to week 10. Week 10 is probably his floor. He had a pretty rough game, could find zero room running the ball behind that line, Minnesota line in week 10. Still got 30 rushing attempts and 96 rushing yards. Not great numbers when you look at 3 yards a carry or less than that, whatever it might come out to be. But nonetheless, he's getting 30 rushing attempts. That's more than Derrick Henry. So let's stick with Dalvin Cook again this week, even though he's likely going to be a chalkier play. Some of the stuff that does stand out numbers-wise and why I will go with a chalkier play this week: Minnesota, 3.78 yards per contact. That is an elite number. Basically, he's not getting touched for 4 yards in a typical game. Last week was different, week 10, but if you're getting 3.78 yards per contact, and then he's off to the races after that. He does his own work after that. Dallas, in particular, the matchup here is very, very good. It's a juicy matchup. Their rushing defense is graded 28th overall by Pro Football Focus. They're allowing 5.0 yards per carry. That's 30th overall in football. And Dallas finally here is giving up the 11th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So even though he's chalky, I am definitely interested in Dalvin Cook this week. He's going to be difficult to fit at that price tag, but we'll make it work. Another guy, Miles Sanders here, a guy that I think is going to go lower owned in a good spot, though, in my opinion, even though he's on the road here. He's $7,600 on FanDuel, $69 on DraftKings. He's playing on the road in Cleveland with a 47.5 over-under in that game. Philadelphia is a slight road underdog here at +2, but it should be a close game with a 22.0 implied team total. The thing here with Miles Sanders, he is underpriced, in my opinion, for an elite running back usage player. Elite usage running back, basically. This guy is very, very good. He does everything that you want out of an elite running back. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's really good in terms of yards per carry. The only downside to this guy, and he doesn't come off the field. He plays in every type of situation. He plays 75% of the snaps. Basically, everything you're looking for in an elite running back comes out of Miles Sanders. The problem is he plays for Philadelphia, who is just who knows what's happening in Philadelphia in terms of their offense right now. But nonetheless, this guy should not be priced below $8,000 in my opinion, yet he is. So I'm comfortable taking him at that price tag, that mid-tier price, versus Cleveland, even though he's on the road. Go back to week 10. We played him in week 10. He did well. He did actually pretty well, all things considered. He would have had a monster game, but for multiple touchdowns being vultured by Boston Scott and other random running backs. Those guys got like 10 snaps combined, 2 other running backs, and they scored the touchdown. So nonetheless, you can't just game log it. You can't just focus on that. You focus on the numbers that matter here, and they are this. Top 5 in the NFL, 71% of the snaps. He is seeing 31+% of the team market share. So basically a third of the offense is run through Miles Sanders. He's averaging 6.8 yards per carry over his last 4 games. Basically, since he's been healthy, he has been a monster when he touches the ball in the backfield. Philadelphia has actually a good number in terms of their offensive line in yards per contact at 3.54. They have a huge offensive line run advantage here at +38% according to Pro Football Focus. And then that Cleveland run defense, they're bottom half in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. They have some good numbers in their favor. I'm not going to list all their numbers because they really don't matter for my play here. It's more of what you know about that defense and what you've seen. The defense of the Cleveland Browns, when they're in tough spots, have struggled. They've had a pretty easy matchup for most weeks against running backs, against offenses. They had a really weird week last week with a monsoon in Cleveland. So their numbers are I don't know if you would call it inflated, deflated. Against running backs, the numbers are decent. But if you focus on their grades, how they grade out on Pro Football Focus, they're not that good. And then finally here, even if they're a decent defense, Miles Sanders has shown the ability as an elite back in a good situation, bad situation, whatever you would call it, to excel, particularly when he played Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, obviously one of the best, if not the best defense in the NFL right now. Miles Sanders had a monster game versus them. So I'm comfortable playing Miles Sanders. I'm hoping this is a great GPP play that gets you lower ownership, especially when you're going with somebody like Dalvin Cook. Miles Sanders at lower ownership may help you there in terms of diversifying your lineup. Two other running backs I will quickly mention here. One of them, again, likely going to be chalky. Mike Davis, $7,400 on FanDuel, $68 on DraftKings, playing at home versus Detroit. It's an excellent matchup. That's basically the play here with Mike Davis. 46.5 over under. Carolina is a slight home favorite at -1.5, so that's solid in Mike Davis's favor, in the running game favor, with a 24.8 implied team total. Basically, the bottom line here is it's a great matchup for Mike Davis, for that Carolina running team. Playing at home, slight home favorite, but Detroit just really struggles versus the run. Of course, the reason we're playing Mike Davis is McCaffrey has been rolled out again. When McCaffrey is out, Mike Davis is basically the workhorse back of Carolina, and we have a number of games to basically support that now. So I'm not scared of playing Mike Davis. He will be chalky, that's something to consider, but he is in a good spot versus Detroit this week. Week 10, a lot of people might go back there. Hopefully we'll go back there and say, oh, he was in a smash spot then and he sucked. Well, he actually got injured during that game, a small injury, a minor injury, one that shouldn't affect him in week 11 here. So hopefully that lowers ownership a little bit on him. We'll have to see. I'm not fully expecting that. I'm preparing for him to be owned. But just lastly, I will mention week 10, his numbers were just off because of that injury. The other situation here is the quarterback situation. So we don't know what's going to happen with Teddy Bridgewater yet. I've tried to wait as long as I can to kind of update this video into the quarterback situation for Carolina. But the point is, whether it's Teddy that's injured or a backup quarterback, they may rely on Mike Davis, may rely on the running game a little bit more because of that situation. And then some of the numbers here. He's an elite usage back when McCaffrey's out. You're seeing 80+% of the snaps. It's an insane number. They have a slight offensive line run blocking advantage according to Pro Football Focus. And then in terms of the matchup, I mentioned it's a great spot here. The rushing defense for Detroit is graded 23rd in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. They're giving up 4.7 yards per carry, which is 26th. And more importantly, they're giving up the most. Detroit is giving up the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So great spot for Mike Davis. Don't go back to week 10 and say he doesn't play a lot or that he wasn't doing well in a good spot there. Focus on what we know. 80% of the snaps. Guy is a monster getting that many snaps in a great situation versus Detroit here. Moving over here to more of a riskier play, and when I say risky, it's because the Patriots, you never know what's going to happen in that backfield. $5,800 on FanDuel is Damian Harris. The price is pretty much the same on DraftKings at $5,700. I think he's a better value on FanDuel personally, but I'm interested in him on both sites. He's playing on the road here in Houston, 49 over under. New England is a road favorite, which is solid in Damian Harris's favor here at -1.5 with a 25.3 implied team total. The first thing I'll mention before all is watch his injury designation. He is banged up. A lot of their backfield is banged up. I suspect he's going to play, but it's something worth monitoring. Obviously, if he's going to be limited or not play, this is a scratch. Don't consider this, but it's something I have to point out right out of the gate here. The good thing is, I mentioned he's a slight road favorite. Even though he's on the road, he's a running back. As long as he's a favorite and they can control that game is what matters here, and I think they do, this New England team. He has a value salary considering his recent usage. That's the big point here. New England is the heaviest run team in the NFL. A lot of that is contributed by Cam Newton, but nonetheless, you're talking about like a 64% run to, what would that come out to be? 46% pass team right now. Basically unheard of in 2020 NFL, in new era NFL. So this team is running the ball a lot, and you're seeing Damian Harris benefit a ton from that. He's averaged 17 plus rushing attempts over the last 3 games. In addition to that, he's actually run the ball very well, averaging 5.5 yards per carry or more over those last 3 games. So Damian Harris, according to the numbers we have, over the last 3 games is the back you want to own. He's getting good usage, 15 plus carries a game at this price tag versus a Houston defense that's very bad against the run is something you want to take advantage of. Now, the big disclaimer is A, the injury, and B, he plays for the Patriots, and at any given time, you could see the Patriots just switch up their backfield. Rex Burkhead could get 70 carries tomorrow, and that wouldn't surprise very many people. So it's a riskier play, but it's definitely a play I'm interested in. As far as I'm aware, Sonny Michel was going to miss this game, so it's the same situation it's been over the last 3 games, which has been good for Damien Harris. The last couple things I want to mention here, Houston, I talked about how bad they are on defense versus the run. Well, they're worst in the NFL in terms of yards per carry at 5.2, and they're giving up the second most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So if this was any other team outside of the Patriots, you would be attacking their running back in this situation. Damien Harris, in my opinion, is a great, hopefully low-owned play, cheaper value play that does help you fit a lot of the players I've already mentioned. I do like Damien Harris. Again, watch the injury, and again, watch the situation at the Patriots backfield. Sliding on over to the wide receivers here, I'm going to start with a guy that's basically been paired with every single video on Justin Herbert, and that's Keenan Allen. $8K on FanDuel, $7,400 on DraftKings, playing, everything I mentioned with Herbert here. Playing at home versus the Jets, 46.5 over-under. The Chargers are big favorites at -8.5 with a 27.3 implied team total. Now, last week was the first week, and Week 10 was the first week with Justin Herbert, outside of an injury week, where Keenan Allen did not get double-digit targets. But don't worry, he still scored a touchdown. So basically what I'm telling you is, with Herbert, in every single game dating back to Week 2, there's one game in which Allen got hurt in the first quarter or something like that, so exclude that game. Every game dating back to Week 2, Keenan Allen has had double-digit targets or scored a touchdown. That's an incredible streak, one that we're going to continue to rely on here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports and in DFS. It's a great matchup this week versus the Jets. I talked about how much I like Herbert. Obviously, that means I like the receivers for him. The wide receiver cornerback matchup, according to Pro Football Focus, has Keenan Allen at plus 41%. That's an insanely high number, so a really good spot against who he's projected to line up and be guarded by. He's a top 5 rated wide receiver according to Pro Football Focus on the season. All the things that we've discussed in previous videos here. He's second in the NFL with a 29% target share, so you know he's getting about a third of the targets from Justin Herbert. He's top 10 in the NFL, at least according to the slate here. Relative to this slate, in yards per route run at 2.17, a really good statistic that helps you identify which receivers are elite in terms of fantasy football right now. And then in terms of the New York Jets, everything applies. They're just really, really bad against this in terms of their secondary. More importantly, when you're talking about a wide receiver, that 73% completion rate that I mentioned with Herbert, which is the worst in the NFL, is really good. So if Keenan Allen gets 12 targets, he literally could catch 10 of them, according to this team and this New York Jets secondary. And then finally here, their secondary is graded the worst in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. So Keenan Allen, great spot. Pair him with Justin Herbert. Play him by himself with another quarterback. I think both options are viable here. The other guy I want to mention here is Calvin Ridley. Now, I originally wanted to talk about Julio Jones, but after I thought about it and looking at it, the numbers, it's basically I want to play Julio Jones, but the numbers for me support playing Calvin Ridley. So let's stick with the strategy. Let's stick with what we go with every single week and what has been successful, and that's the numbers in looking into those specifically. $7,800 on FanDuel, $7K on DraftKings. He's playing on the road in New Orleans, 49 over under. Atlanta is a slight dog here at plus 4.5 with a 22.8 implied team total. That implied team total bothers me. It's a little lower than I would have expected for this particular game. Nonetheless, I still like Calvin Ridley, and I do like Julio Jones. But Calvin Ridley here should be back fully healthy, and basically the play here over Jones is he's a lower salary and a lower ownership versus Jones. Nonetheless, arguably has better numbers, deeper numbers than Julio Jones. This game in particular has the third highest over-under. They're a road dog. I talked about that already. And they're playing in a dome, so that's always good for Matt Ryan. That's always good for basically every passing game playing on the road here in New Orleans in the dome. But Calvin Ridley, I talked about the numbers for him. He's top 10 in the NFL in terms of a grade for a wide receiver, according to Pro Football Focus. He's basically one of the best receivers in the league. He's top 10 in team air yards at 36%. He's top 5 in yards per route run at 2.31. And he's second in the NFL, and this is the most important thing to me. He's second overall behind Devontae Adams in the NFL in red zone targets with 15, and he's missed a game. So consider that, compare that to Julio Jones. Julio Jones does not top a lot of those numbers. you want to go Calvin Ridley, in my opinion, knowing that he's going to be lower owned and knowing that he's going to be, that he is cheaper. Finally here, the matchup is good. New Orleans secondary is graded 20th, so they're basically bottom 10 in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Good spot here for basically that whole Atlanta passing attack, but I do really like Calvin Ridley as the one guy that stands out to me. I'll quickly browse through these last two guys here. Deontay Johnson for the Steelers stands out to me. He basically is just underpriced. $6,400 on FanDuel, $59 on DraftKings. He's playing on the road here in Jacksonville, 46 over-under. It's a little scary. Pittsburgh is a -10 favorite, so a huge favorite, maybe the biggest on the board here, with a 28.0 implied team total. Again, a value price. I think he's the best receiver on that Steelers team. If you look at his recent performance, the dude has been just commanding a ton of targets. 21 targets over his last 2 games, 6 receptions, 193 receiving yards, and a touchdown, again, over the last 2 games. Now, he's been banged up. He commands a strong target share, a strong usage when he's healthy. Focus on the healthy games, and this guy is not a $6,400 FanDuel receiver. He shouldn't be priced below $6K on DraftKings. That's the play here. Juju's priced higher. I believe Claypool's priced at him or higher. Deontay Johnson just basically shouldn't be the cheapest receiver on the Steelers. So we should take advantage of that. We should take advantage of the value here. Now, again, it's scary because they are heavy road favorites, but Pittsburgh has been a favorite even at home, big favorites over the last several games, and they continue to throw the ball a lot. James Conner has not done a lot. Trust me, I've played a lot of him. He's been getting usage, but nonetheless, Big Ben just keeps throwing the ball. They have huge passing volume. So don't be necessarily scared off of that -10 tag there. Do I think I'll stack the Steelers? Will I stack Ben Roethlisberger? No, but I think you can still pick players, particularly Deontay Johnson, when you get a value price on him out of that game. It's a really good matchup. Jacksonville, their secondary is graded 29th overall in football by Pro Football Focus. Jacksonville is giving up the 10th most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. And last but not least here, sometimes I like to look at DVOA. It does stand out here. In terms of their pass defense, Jacksonville's DVOA is ranked 31st overall in football. So a great spot for Deontay Johnson at that price tag. And then a really good value here on DraftKings is Denzel Mims. $5,400 on FanDuel. That price is a little whatever. I'm not really interested in him on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he's $3,300. Playing on the road here against the Chargers, 46.5 over-under. Mims and the Jets are plus 8.5 underdogs here with a very, very small 18.8 implied team total. But we're going to skip all of that. The point of this is on DraftKings at $3,300, it's a great value. If I'm playing on FanDuel and you make me choose a Jet, I'm going to choose Crowder over him at that price tag. But again, $3,300 on DraftKings is a different story. At that price, you do not need a lot of production to actually hit value. In fact, if he catches a couple balls, I mean, hopefully he does more, but in general, if he catches a couple or has a couple receptions, then it basically is okay at $3,300. Plus all of that, we're talking a lot about the Chargers stacking Herbert, stacking Allen. This is a good, cheap way to come back against that stack. We talk about it a lot. When I stack players, when I stack teams and quarterbacks and wide receivers, I like to find somebody to come back against with. In this particular case, it's Denzel Mims on DraftKings. The team of the Jets, of course, should trail here, being big underdogs. They should see more passing volume. I don't believe Darnold's playing. I believe it's still Flacco, but he's seen with Flacco increasing usage in snaps and targets. So I think Mims is still a solid play nonetheless. He actually, if you go back the last 3 games, he has seen the most snaps out of all New York Jets wide receivers. So Mims is playing more and more. He was banged up earlier in the season. He's a young rookie for him. At this point, I think they're just trying to get exposure to see how he actually plays. Going back before their Week 10 bye, Week 9, he had 8 targets, 4 receptions, 62 yards. Not the best performance in the world, but if you get 10 points on DraftKings for $3,000, come on, man. Let's play it here. It's a great value. And then finally here, it is a difficult matchup, but the overall arching thing here is the fact that he's $3,300. I can't say it enough. I've said it 10 times. Denzel Mims is my favorite value play at wide receiver on DraftKings. Now, we are moving on to the most important thing I want to talk about for Week 11, maybe this whole year. and everybody's going to be on it, but I don't care. This is fun, and it's a mistake that we need to take advantage of, and that's Taysom Hill on FanDuel. So we're talking tight ends now. He's $4,500 on FanDuel. Does that price matter? Yes and no. We're not talking about price here. We're talking about the fact that he is still listed as a tight end on FanDuel. Why does that matter? Because he's projected to be the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. What does that mean? You can play a quarterback at the tight end position. The position we hate. I hate playing tight ends. I hate picking tight ends. But this week, we can play Taysom Hill at tight end, even though he's playing and starting at quarterback. Is there a chance he doesn't start? At this point, everything I read says he's the starting quarterback. I know there's a little bit of back and forth, but he's going to play more than he normally does, and he's going to get more points than he normally does. If he starts at quarterback and he has a bad game of quarterback and he gets 10 points, that is better than 90% of tight ends. So make sure you take advantage of this. People are going to be on him. It'll legitimately provide you a tight end floor of 12 to 15 points. Again, I will say it one last time, on FanDuel, playing at home versus Atlanta with a 49 over-under, New Orleans is a 4.5 point under favorite with a 27.3 implied team total. Their starting quarterback, Taysom Hill, is listed as tight end. Just play him at tight end. You're starting 2 quarterbacks this week. That's what you're going to do. You're going to start 2 quarterbacks on FanDuel this week, and we're going to win. That's how it's going to be played out. But besides that, the last thing I'll mention with him is the fact that I don't think everybody knows this. I think you're going to see 60-70% ownership of Taysom Hill. I don't think it matters. He's $4,500. It's going to work out. It's going to basically give you a free square of points on FanDuel. I really, really can't see going away from that in any circumstance, even if ownership is that high or higher. So something to consider here, unless there's a drastic change in the narrative going into tomorrow, which I don't see it changing. Just play Taysom Hill at tight end on FanDuel. But if you want to talk about another guy you could play at tight end, particularly on DraftKings, is Dallas Goedert here. 58 on FanDuel, but again, I don't think we're playing him at flex. We're not playing him at tight end because Taysom Hill's playing at tight end. He's $3,800 on DraftKings. That's what stands out here, that DraftKings price. Playing on the road here for Philadelphia in Cleveland. I don't typically like to give multiple players, particularly a wide receiver, tight end, and a running back. I gave Sanders earlier, but the price here stands out at $3,800. We have to save money based upon the plays I've given out so far. So this is where we're going to try to do some of that. Again, playing on the road here in Cleveland, 47.5 over-under. Philadelphia is an underdog of +3, so it should be a close game. 22.0 implied team total. Finally, lastly, the guy here, great value price on DraftKings, $3,800. He gets a usage bump with Ertz now on IR, excluding injury for Goddard himself, who hasn't been injured in Philadelphia. He's averaging 7 to 8 targets a game, so that's a really good number. Again, at that price tag of $3,800, we will take that day in and day out. Philadelphia offense is getting healthier as the weeks go on here. And finally here, Cleveland historically has struggled versus covering inside players, both tight ends and inside receivers. Go through game logs. Check out one of 2 of those, if not both, typically score or do well versus Cleveland. So we do want to take advantage of here, and the numbers that support that they're giving up the 14th most fantasy points to tight ends per game for the Cleveland Browns defense. That really wraps it up in terms of tight ends. Again, play Taysom Hill on FanDuel. I could say it over and over again. If you don't do it, it's your mistake. And then Goddard is a great price at DraftKings at $3,800. Always want to mention some other guys. Of course, I can't cover every player I'll be including in my lineups. I'm a GPP tournament style player. I put together a ton of lineups. So other guys I am definitely interested in here. At quarterback, you're talking Cam Newton for New England. And then I have somebody highlighted here that I want to quickly talk about. That's PJ Walker for Carolina. I mentioned Teddy Bridgewater. I'm suspecting he's going to find a way to play. I don't see very much information suggesting otherwise, but he is banged up. Should Teddy Bridgewater miss this game, PJ Walker is the starter as far as I'm aware. PJ Walker, if you've been a part of No Huddle Fantasy Sports or followed us at all, in the spring, the XFL League, PJ Walker was insane. He's a really, really good quarterback in the XFL, of course. Will that translate to the NFL? I don't know. But if he gets a chance to start here, I'll be taking a chance on him. PJ Walker, quarterback for Carolina, should Teddy Bridgewater miss time. Beyond that, some running backs I want to talk about quickly. Duke Johnson, running back for Houston. value play here. I think he's like 6K, a little bit more, a little bit less on both sites. I think he's still in a good spot here. He's the only healthy back in that Houston backfield. James Conner for Pittsburgh, we'll give him another whirl here. Huge favorite. He's checking a lot of boxes outside of the fact he's not playing at home. So that should be the spot for him, right? Maybe if he gets on the road here, he should actually finally pay off. Melvin Gordon, he's a little bit of a chance you can take here playing for Denver. Great spot versus Miami, in my opinion, playing at home. I just don't know why they're paying this guy if they're not going to start using him more. We'll see how it plays out, but Melvin Gordon to me is a guy I do want to highlight very quickly. I talked about Julio Jones, wide receiver for Atlanta. I think both him and Calvin Ridley are in play. Terry McLaurin is just, he's a really good receiver. Continue to play him at his price tag on both sites. Justin Jefferson, I think he's one of the best receivers, young receivers we have in the NFL right now. In general, I think he's in a great spot this week. The downside is we like Dalvin Cook. They should win this game. They should take advantage of running the ball a lot. They only throw the ball. That's Minnesota, Cousins. They only throw the ball when they need to. That's the only downside with Jefferson. But nonetheless, in limited opportunity, limited volume, the guy really gets it done. He's an excellent player, in my opinion. Somebody I'm definitely considering playing this week. And then finally here, I didn't talk about stacking anyone with Jackson. You don't have to do it. I will, particularly will stack Marquise Brown with him, waiting for another blow-up spot for Marquise Brown. He's been complaining a lot. Maybe they'll force feed him the ball more. I really believe this is a revenge spot. I really believe that the Baltimore Ravens are just looking to terrorize any way they can. Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, all the running backs they have, they're going to terrorize Tennessee this week, or do their best to, in my opinion. And I do like Marquise Brown to stack with Lamar Jackson if you're going to do that. And so that really wraps it up. Again, thank you guys as always for following along here. I know these videos can get a little lengthy in general. We're talking 40 minutes or so, but as far as I'm aware, you guys leave comments. You really enjoy the content. I break it down. Down below, you should have the ability to, I timestamp the stuff. So if you want to skip the quarterbacks, if you want to skip the tight ends, Taysom Hill, by the way, on FanDuel, make sure you play him. You just got to click that stuff. Outside of that, always, I'll mention down in the description, Daily Fantasy Nerd is the optimizer I use. I would not be doing as well as I am this year in DFS if it was not for Daily Fantasy Nerd. So I highly suggest you guys check it out if you haven't done so already. I believe you'll get a free month, which pretty much takes you through the end of the season at this point. You might as well check it out, in my opinion. It's a great optimizer. In addition to that, it tracks bankroll. It gives you value plays. It helps me set up these videos. It's a great tool. If you want to be better at DFS and you enter multiple lineups, that's the key here. You do want to make sure you use an optimizer. Daily Fantasy Nerd is bar none the best, in my opinion. So make sure you check it out. Down in the description is an affiliate link. It does help this channel out every time you click it, so I do appreciate that. And last but not least here, as always, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Please make sure you follow me at NoHuddleFS. I post a little bit of content there, especially when I do some updates or have some changes to stuff. So make sure you're following me at NoHuddleFS on Twitter. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Give these videos a like. You guys have been the best for these 10, 11 weeks of the season. I do really appreciate it. Leave me some comments down below. But moving on to week 11 here, I wish you guys the best of luck, and I will catch you in the next video.